There we go. Okay. So we'll come back to this text here. I'm going to come, let me look. Yeah. We'll do this verse 740 in this section called Dhyana Vichara. I think this is still in section 2 of the whole thing. Yeah, it is. 740. So it says, how can the ego, I, imagine itself as that, when that, its source, can only be attained after destroying utterly this I? The right way is the ego gone, abiding in the heart in silence. The ego in the in this case is like from Sankhya Yoga, the ahankara. So the I, me, my thought. The ego is not all of the thoughts and emotions and things that come after that I, me, my thought. So the ego is looking directly at the thought I, me, my as being a separate, independent, existent thing. So how can that thought I, imagine itself as that with a big T, meaning what you are, or your nature, when that, your nature, its source, can only be attained after destroying utterly this I? So the I thought, of course, is not a thing. I think we talked about this a bit yesterday. The I thought is not a separate thing inside of the body. So it cannot be birthed or destroyed, really, as a thing. What gets uprooted is the identification as that I thought. So that's what really gets pulled out, let's say. And the I thought will keep presenting, but it's not a thing to be murdered, like a tree to chop down, let's say. There's nothing there, yeah? So it's the identification with that I thought which has you stuck to the body and what happens to that body, and in so that you're bound, you sense that you're bound as an individual. So how can that I thought, which is taking itself to be an independent, permanent thing, separate from everything else, which is not a fact, by the way, but that's the way it presents, as a separate, independent thing. Me is a separate, independent thing, and that me thought is only ever thinking from its own standpoint. That's called self-centeredness. That self-centeredness will override everything. So it's like you will hire an accountant to help you with your accounting. The accountant will tell you what to do, and then you'll say, I don't agree. This is like the craziness of the head in many ways. It will override everything based on its own self-centered view. So the I thought part of its self-centered view is that it thinks it's going to become your nature. Now the mental system is presenting as what you are, the me. Yeah. When your head says me, it's presenting that as that's what you are, and it's pointing to this body. But at the same time, through this spiritual seeking, it thinks it's going to become your nature, let's say. The big T that, or big S self. The head thinks it's going to become that through spiritual practice. It believes, because it's taking itself to be a thing, it thinks it can get somewhere. So J thinks it can get somewhere through spiritual practice based on its idea that it's a thing. So on its idea of thingness, it's going to go from one place to another, but there's no thing there. So it's just speaking, essentially, claiming that you are the mental system and that you're going to get somewhere, meaning you're going to become the absolute as the individual. Or in the words of recovery, the finite is going to become the infinite. But the finite can never become the infinite because it's finite, yes? That's the whole point of this verse. So it says, how can the I thought imagine itself as that, big T, that, when that is its source, can only be attained by utterly destroying the I thought. So really destroying the identification with, or the grasping or the attachment to the I thought is really the movement. It is through the negation of you being that I thought and this body as what you are, as your nature, where you start. It is through the negation of that you land in what you already are, which is the big T that. Yeah? You are, that is your nature now. What's trying to become that cannot become that. That's like the cloud trying to become the sky, but always being identified as a cloud. It can't do it, you see. The cloud will never become the sky. The cloud exists only because of the sky, but it's not going to undo itself to skyness, let's say. So this is the same thing with the mental. I think, let's say, that I'm going to get back to being what void or whatever thing that's going to happen. The finite, which is J, which is born and dies, thinks it's going to become the unborn and the undead through spiritual practice. This negates that idea. This says the identification with that mental movement is cut, yes, then you already are what you're looking for, which is the whole point of this whole thing. So then it says the right way is the ego gone. So the identification with the thought me has been uprooted, let's say. Abiding in the heart in silence, which is essentially you are that with the big T. So it is through something being negated where you rest in what you already are. So obviously you're identified as something that you're not, which is that I thought, which they would call ego or the ahankara in Sankhya Yoga. The identification with that I thought, boom, has us essentially blind to what our nature is. It's like listening. You listen to the mental system talking all day, then you abide by that, you live as that, and that directs your life, yeah? So now you're living as a finite, self-centered thing called me. But from before that, the open listening, if that's not identified with, the mental system keeps going, the body keeps moving. But not being identified with that so much, the life gets a lot lighter because you're no longer bound to the self-centered claustrophobia of me. This is the whole point of the thing. You would think that me thought is looking out for you, but it's not really. It's looking out for itself, based on its own ideas and its own beliefs. And it will put the body in very weird situations based on those ideas and beliefs. So essentially what the verse is saying, how can the thought me become what I already am? If I already am what I already am, then whatever is trying to become that would need to be put into question rather than just followed blindly. It's like meditation can be used very easily for me trying to get out of me. And that form of that movement is based on a very hateful thing, I feel. It's based on the idea that I hate me, so I want out of that situation. But also what hates me is more of the same mental thing that I'm trying to get out of. So the more I identify with the me who's trying to get out of itself, the more immersed I am in the struggle of trying to get out of itself. And that's the beauty of verses like this, which are so direct. The you who's trying to get out, the you who's trying to become peaceful, that ain't you, essentially. And that you can never get back to what you already are, which is silence and peace itself. Yeah? So that's why the verse asks the question, how can the ego I imagine itself as that, meaning what you are, when that can only be attained by destroying the identification with the I, the ego I. Yeah. So essentially, if you stop identifying with what you're not, there you are as what you are. If you keep identifying with what you're not, the body and the mind, then you are constantly on its adventure to become what you already are, which it can't become that. Yeah. This is what I noticed in my own experience of recovery. It's like I was always trying to become something and it kept failing. It just kept failing because I was still living, I was still operating under the identification as the one who's going to get out of itself. And that can't happen. Jay's not getting out of Jay. Jay is what has the alcoholism, you see. I'm not going to rid the Jay of the alcoholism. The freedom comes from before the whole thing. In the question, who is the Jay? Yeah. Then there's a real relief there, because all the game of Jay trying to get out of Jay and become something else, you can give up on all that. Because you no longer have to live being driven by the mental system. And then there's a wide open door for something else to happen. Yeah, beautiful. So how could you possibly become your true nature? How could the you you're identified as this thing, become not this thing? It can't do it. Yeah. So it's only through the negation of the identification as what I am as being this thing that then you sit back into what you already are the whole time. It's like the peace that you're looking for, that's your nature. What's trying to become that is what gets put into question here. What is trying to squirm out of the discomfort? That's what's put into question. It's presented through a mental system. Well, who is hearing that mental system? That's the question. Huh? At the end of that verse, it says, the right way, the ego gone, abiding in the heart in silence. So it's kind of like when Ramana said, the only requirement is to see the unreal. See the unreal as unreal. Meaning, unreal meaning things don't have their own separate, something that doesn't live independently from everything else would be considered unreal, because it doesn't have its own reality. That's talking about you, yeah? The body and the mind. That's talking about that you. So the right way is, when the ego gone is the identification with the I thought. So if that's uprooted, then you only land in one place, which they say here is abiding in the heart in silence, which is essentially the big S self Ramana is talking about, or your nature, where you start, yeah? Open listening. So it's not by becoming something. It's by putting into question and negating the identification with what you take yourself to be, body, senses, mind, and then you land somewhere. But you can only land into what you already are, obviously. It's like that, very similar in recovery. If there's a loss of faith in the J-ness, then you land in the higher whatever you want to call it. But as long as we're identified as the body and the mind, we're going to be driven by self-centeredness, because it's a self-centered system. So being driven by that self-centered mental system, you're essentially blind to what your nature is through the identification with the self-centered J-ness. Yeah? If I'm only listening to the self-centered J-ness, I'm blind as far as like sitting back into what I am, because all the attention is on the self-centered J-ness. And then that J-ness wants to become what I already am, the nature, yeah? That the mental system is a system of becoming. It always wants to get more things. So now it will want to get out of itself, and it will want to get into something else. This is like the hunger of the mental system, based on its own self-centered whatever. So if you don't see that, then you're constantly being driven by it. And there's the verse is saying, it is the negation of that, only the negation of the identification with that, where you land in the peace of the heart. It's like the eye thought can't turn, it can't see open space. Like the eyes can only see objects, they don't see space. They just attach to objects. The ears, they hear objects, or a form, let's say, as far as sound. They don't see the open space which is aware of the hearer. Yeah, so it's through the negation as being what only sees objects that you start to sense that there's an open space which is aware of all those objects. Well, it's the same thing with thinking, with the thoughts. If you identify with the thoughts, then you're only listening to those thoughts, essentially. Your whole life is identified as an idea. And those ideas are conditioned. There's a sense that you're doing those ideas, but that you're not really. They're all thoughts which are firing based on provoked events, let's say. And they're conditioned, so they're going to be the same as always. So, I just don't see any other way of getting relief from the system as it. I don't see how you could possibly get relief from a system if you're identified as it. And it cannot get out of itself. Self cannot get out of small s self, or J cannot get out of being J. It's bound to J-ness. Yeah. Thankfully, you can give up on that identification, because that's not what you are. That's not where you start. All right. Let's see if there's a different one here I can find. Unless there's a question or something. Okay. We'll go to 773. This verse says, what our master, he's referring to Ramana Maharshi, clearly teaches by way of great, good, powerful tapas, which is essentially like effort, is only this and nothing more, be still. Yeah. Apart from this, the mind has no task to do or thought to think. That's cool. So, it is only this and nothing more, be still. So if you sit down and relax the body, you can start listening to sound. Is a good way to calm the system down. I feel that's probably the best way to calm the system down. The mental system, and then relax the body. And then whatever can't stay still can be negated as what you are. So the you that you're identified as, the one who's saying that they're anxious or depressed or this or this or this or this or whatever, it cannot stay still, because this system is not a system of stillness. It's a system of movement, because it's a dualistic system. It goes up and down, left and right. It breathes in and out. Yeah, it's a system of action, the body and the brain. So when it says be still, obviously it's not talking about the body and the brain, because they can't really be still for any longer than a couple minutes, if that. A couple minutes I feel would actually be quite generous. But the cue be still in many ways points out what you're not, because what you're not, what gets negated as what you are is what can't be still, which is the body and the brain. The heart's pumping, the blood's moving, there's sensation through the body. So rather than grasping onto that movement, and then of course all the mental movement, rather than grasping onto that movement, you see what can't be still and you stop grasping onto it. And you stop grasping onto the movement of I'm going to become something else. You stop grasping onto the movement of I have to go do this or I am this way. All of that is movement, yeah? So if what you are is stillness, how could what's constantly moving become stillness as a solution, meaning as something that will stay still? It can't do it. And the relief of that is when you negate what's moving as what you are, then you sit back into the stillness that you already are. But the real relief for the body is you stop trying to make it do things that it can't do. You stop trying to force the body and the brain to do things that they can't do. You see that it's a system of movement and you leave it alone from before it. Yeah? And that gives a lot of relief to the body and the brain, because most of us are pushing this system way too hard based on the mental desires for whatever it's chasing after at any given moment or time. It's an obscene system in many ways, especially if you're in recovery. I'm sure you understand that. So what the Master teaches is only this and nothing more: be still. Apart from this, the mind has no task to do or thought to think. Yet it's thinking tons of thoughts, yeah? So if you see it, and you see that it's not you, rather than go with those thoughts as yours, you might sit back into something that's a lot more still. Because stilling what's constantly moving doesn't work. It never worked. It never worked. And then there's a lot of stuff out there which will say, well, if you just keep going and do all these next things that I'm selling, it will finally be still. But it can't be still. Okay? The mental system cannot be still. It's a system of anxious movement, and there's nothing wrong with it, really. It's in our attempts to try to make it do what it can't do. It's like trying to make a giraffe do a backflip here. And it never works, yeah? The real killer of that is if you're identified as it, then there's always this sense that you're failing. And this whole thing of, I just keep failing. What's failing at becoming still is failing at becoming still because it can't be. That's not what it does. That's not what it does. So it's through the identification as what's constantly moving that you can't seemingly be still or be here now or whatever. Whatever the brain is chasing. Yeah? It has a complete desire to be still. I'm going to be peaceful. That's the thought that would come. I am going to be peaceful if I just keep pushing and pushing and pushing. How can something become peaceful if it's constantly pushing? So it is through the negation of what is constantly pushing, through the negation as that being what you are, that you sit into the stillness that you already are. It is by seeing that all of those mental ideas, when they arise to the sense of me. The inquiry is, am I that me? Am I that me thought? And then the inquiry stays on the me. If you can find a me, then it would all make sense in a way. Yeah? Oh, all these thoughts are about me as a thing. But when you look for the me thought, there is no me thought. There's no thing there called a me. Yeah? There's no thing. It's part of the thought system. It's fun. It's quite the funny game. So when it says be still, what can't be still? Stop identifying with that. Now the me thought definitely cannot be still. That comes and goes. When you go to sleep at night, the me thought is gone. Jay is gonzo when I go to sleep at night. When the eyes open, it's back online. Yeah? Full of memories. There's time. There was a Jay yesterday. There will be a Jay tomorrow. So there must be a Jay here now. What is that? Oh, it's this body. Yeah? All of that stuff is going on. But obviously it can't be still if it's coming and going, yes? All right. So if there's any question, you can put it in the box there, if I dare ask. Frederick, maybe. I don't know. You think that we have the body in this? I'm not sure. I don't know. The only question to me is, are you that body? Because if you see that individuality is elusive, that the sense of individuality is definitely happening, but it's presenting something that's not actually there, you'll stop caring about that question. That question won't really matter that much, of why has this happened and why is this here, yeah? This is like an event, this whole thing that's popped up here. So why it's popped up, I don't know, because the open space of everythingness has energy moving through it, and that in the Indian system, the open space, the energy within that takes form as separate things, and this is one of those things. And this computer is one of those things, and the plant and the bike and the lamp are one of those things. But they all pop up within the open space of what is aware of those things. So why does that happen? Who cares, really, is the question. Who's the one who cares about that? The thing, that's an interesting thing, I feel. I know people hear this message and then it brings up I don't know how to say. To me, this is not about a bunch of questions and a theoretical asking a bunch of ideas. I always just wanted peace. That was the only thing. I just wanted relief from whatever mayhem was going on in my head, you know? So to me, this message, it's not about well, why is this and why is this? It's always just who is the one asking that question. The relief is from the need to know, in a way. That's what I feel. The relief comes from the need to know about why the universe is operating, and why do governments do this, and why is this so messy. Yeah? It's staying on who's the one who wants to know all of that. Because if it's not me who wants to know all of that, then it's like the title of the Ramesh Balsekar book, Who Cares? Who's the one who cares about all of that, yeah? Because if I'm bound to that one who's caring, I'm just bound to its constant mental anxiety about the next thing, about the next question. Like when the questions come up about the world, why is the world this way? Because it's dualistic. That's why. Because this is a self-centered system. And the next body over there and over there are self-centered systems. That's how this operation works. You're not being self-centered. It's a mechanical movement. This is self-centered. So it's going to choose what it believes over what other people believe. And then there's war and corruption and governments and power and greed and all of that. Yeah? So the suffering comes from inside the house, essentially. That's why this world is so crazy the way it is. It's a dualistic thing. That's why war has always been happening forever. It's just like, because this is a dualistic experience. The whole thing about the inquiry is to say you're not that movement, so you should stop listening to it. Yeah? You should inquire into who is the one who takes themselves to be that sense of self-centeredness, and then you're no longer bound to the self-centeredness. So the self-centeredness will continue on, but not being bound to it, you don't have to listen to it, essentially. And in that is a great relief, including relief from the questions of why do you think the body exists and that kind of stuff. Yeah, like that, because that questions like that will never end. They'll just keep going on and on and on. It's kind of like in addiction recovery. There's all this science, constant science about how people can get not addicted to substance. Ironically, the science uses other substance to try to not addict them to the one they're addicted to. So now they're just addicted to the one that they want them addicted to. But whatever. But it's missing the whole point, you see. They're missing the whole point that the addict is not self. They're not the mental system. Yeah, that's where the whole problem starts, in self-centeredness. Being identified as that self-centered system, that's what the person wants to get out of by using substance, whatever that substance is. Yeah, but they don't look at that. They're just, well, what's the science? And we're going to keep researching. And we're going to keep doing this. And we're going to keep doing this and this and this. But they're off the point. They've already left the point of the problem, which they knew in the 1940s. Oh, the problem is self-centeredness. You lose faith in self-centeredness, and the addict gets relief. They stop doing addict-type stuff. Yeah? Great. How do you do that? You put faith in a higher power rather than your individuality. Great. Yeah? But then the doctors and the corporations and things get a hold of it. And now it's all, okay, well, we need more research and we need to do more science on how are we going to get the hit. The problem's been solved in many ways, yeah? The problem, the answer to your question has already been given. Who is the one who has the question? That's cool. Who is the one who's constantly questioning, why is the sky up and the ground down? And it always comes back to the answer, me. You're not that me. So really put it up to the acid test and see if you can find the me that you're living as. Yeah. And then you know it from before it as an illusion. And then the question thing can be put to rest. That would put a lot of space. That would give a lot of relief and space to the mental system. A lot. Holy. Wow. Yeah. So if there's anything else, otherwise we will wrap it up from there.